You are looking at one of the most harrowing images ever committed to paper. It is a testament to a time when the torture of a human being was not merely permissible. It was policy. It was bureaucratic. It is a masterpiece of technical skill. The lines are clean, the shading is impeccable, the anatomy is studied. And it depicts an act of cruelty so profound that the mind instinctively tries to reject it as fiction. We want to believe this is mythology, a scene from Dante's Inferno, a nightmare conjured by a troubled artist. But this is not a nightmare. This is a document. The image is small, rendered in the unforgiving medium of copperplate engraving. There are no colors to distract you, no brush strokes to hide behind. Just black ink on white paper, delineating the architecture of suffering. In the center, a man of African descent is suspended. He is not hanged by the neck. That would be too quick. That would be mercy. He is suspended by a large iron meat hook, driven deep underneath his ribs. Look at the precision of the artist's hand here. We see the physics of the torture. The hook isn't just resting there, it is bearing the entire weight of a grown man. We can almost feel the terrible tension on the intercostal muscles, the stretching of the skin, the agonizing pressure on the lungs with every shallow breath. His hands are tied behind his back, eliminating any hope of self-relief. He cannot shift his weight. He cannot struggle. He can only hang. But the most chilling element of this composition is not the hook. It is the face. He is not screaming. His face is not contorted in the rictus of terror we expect from Baroque martyrdoms. He possesses a stoic, almost transcendent calm. He is alive, fully conscious, yet he seems already removed from the world that inflicted this upon him. This quiet dignity makes the violence done to his body infinitely more obscene. Below his feet, the artist provides the context of his fate. We see skulls, a jawbone, a femur. This is a place of systematic termination. He is hanging over the remains of those who came before him. He knows exactly what his future holds. He is waiting to become the debris beneath him. This is not a sudden act of passion. This is an orchestrated slow-motion execution designed not just to kill, but to terrorize anyone who witnessed it. Who would draw such a thing? And more importantly, who witnessed it? To understand this image, we must leave the comfort of the art gallery and descend into the green hell of 18th century colonial Surinam. This was a Dutch plantation colony, incredibly lucrative due to sugar and coffee, and notoriously, perhaps uniquely, brutal in its treatment of enslaved peoples. The death rates were astronomical. The jungle was dense, disease-ridden, and terrifying to the European colonizers. And the enslaved people fought back. Many escaped into the deep interior, forming Maroon communities. They waged fierce guerrilla wars against the plantations. The Dutch were terrified, and fear breeds supreme cruelty. Into this violent theatre stepped a man named John Gabriel Stedman. Stedman was a Scottish-Dutch soldier who volunteered to go to Surinam to help put down these rebellions. He spent 5 years in the jungle. Stedman was a complicated figure. He was a participant in the colonial machine, a soldier chasing escaped slaves. Yet, his journals reveal a man deeply disturbed by the sadistic punishments he witnessed daily on the plantations. He fell in love with an enslaved woman named Joanna, and they had a son. He was a man caught between duty and conscience, a horrified voyeur in a land without morality. When he returned to Europe, he published his memoirs, Narrative of a 5 years expedition against the Revolted Negroes of Surinam. It was meant to be a travelogue, a military journal. It became a catalogue of horrors. Stedman described punishments that beggar belief: breaking on the wheel, mutilation, burning at the stake. And then he describes the scene that became our image. Stedman did not imagine this. He stood in front of this man. In his journal, Stedman records stumbling upon this rebel Negro suspended from the gibbet. He writes that the man had already been hanging there for 3 days. 3 days alive on a hook. Stedman, horrified, describes approaching the man. The victim, even in this extremity of agony, recognized Stedman's uniform. According to Stedman, the man begged for a drink of water, but the soldiers guarding the gibbet refused, under orders to let him die as slowly as possible. Stedman writes that the man then asked for a pipe of tobacco. In a bizarre act of grim mercy, a soldier lit one and held it to the dying man's lips. Stedman records the victim's final words to his tormentors. He didn't beg for his life. He told them that their cruelty meant nothing, that his people in the jungle would eventually wipe the Dutch off the face of the earth. Stedman walked away, leaving the man to die. But the image never left him. He sketched it in his notebook, a crude, on-the-spot documentation of a nightmare. But when the book was to be published in London, those sketches needed to be turned into professional engravings. They needed a master's hand. Enter William Blake. Today we know Blake as a visionary poet, a mystic who saw angels in the trees of London and conversed with prophets. We see him as a romantic dreamer. We forget that Blake was also a working-class artisan. His day job was engraving. He was hired to illustrate other people's books. When Stedman's publisher brought these sketches to Blake in the early 1790s, they couldn't have known what they were unleashing. Blake was a radical. He despised authority. He hated the Industrial Revolution, and more than anything, he abhorred slavery. He viewed the enslavement of another human being as a spiritual crime that damned both the victim and the perpetrator. When Blake took Stedman's eyewitness sketch, he didn't just copy it, he transmuted it. Blake took a journalistic record and turned it into a secular crucifixion. Look closely at Blake's technique. Blake developed a unique style of engraving that was deeply physical. He felt the copper plate was a living thing he had to cut into. When Blake carved the lines of the victim's ribs, the tension in the ropes, the hollows of the skulls beneath, he was channeling his own ferocious moral outrage. He gave the victim that beatific, calm face. In Stedman's account, the man is defiant. In Blake's image, he is a martyr. Blake elevates him above his torturers. He endows him with a spiritual fortitude that the iron hook cannot pierce. Blake ensures that you cannot look away. He makes the horror beautiful in its technical execution, which forces the viewer into an uncomfortable relationship with the image. We are seduced by the artistry, only to be repulsed by the subject. By the time Blake was finished, it was no longer just an illustration for a travel book. It had become a weapon. When Stedman's book was published in 1796, featuring Blake's engravings, it sent shockwaves through Europe. The abolitionist movement was growing in Britain, and they needed proof. They needed something to counter the propaganda of the plantation owners who claimed slavery was a benign institution. They found their proof in Blake's images. This engraving and others from the book were circulated widely. They were held up in meetings. They were passed around in coffee houses. They forced the polite society of London to confront the source of their cheap sugar and coffee.
It was images like this that eventually made the continuation of the slave trade politically and morally untenable in the British Empire. But what does it mean for us to look at it today? There is a terrible intimacy in viewing suffering of this magnitude. We feel a sense of guilt, a voyeuristic shame in staring at a man in his final, agonizing hours. Some argue that showing such images re-victimizes the subject, that it turns black pain into a spectacle. It is a valid argument. But to look away is also a choice. To look away is to erase the reality of what was done. Blake demands that we bear witness. He demands that we do not sanitize history. The man on the hook has no name recorded by history. We know him only by the method of his destruction. He hangs there in the void of the past, suspended between life and death, between the witness of Stedman and the fury of Blake. He is a silent, eternal reminder of the capacity for darkness that lies waiting in the human soul when unchecked by conscience.